A fine rain fell on the village of Saint-Thomé, as if the sky were too tired to truly cry. It was the kind of rain that doesn't soak, but weighs heavily. It weighs on the air, it weighs on the chest, it weighs on the shoulders of those who already carried too much for too long. And that's how Clara walked that Tuesday morning, her worn shoes on the hard, packed earth, her eyes fixed on the ground as if searching for something she had lost long ago. Perhaps dignity, perhaps hope, perhaps just a reason to go home. Clara was 24 years old, but her eyes said 35. She lived with her mother and stepfather in an incomplete brick house where the plaster never reached the walls of her room. She slept on a thin mattress, covered by a faded floral sheet, and woke up every day to the sound of Sauvaldir's voice complaining about the coffee, the food, the heat, the world, and especially about her. "That one isn't even good enough to marry," he would say to Clara's mother while cutting bread with a butter-stained knife. And her mother, Donna Fatima, pretended not to hear. Or perhaps she didn't pretend. Perhaps she really didn't hear anymore. She had become accustomed to the weight of those words like one gets used to the noise of an old fan. It bothers you at first, then becomes part of the silence. Clara worked as a helper in a downtown grocery store, carrying boxes, restocking shelves, sweeping the floor after customers left. The owner, Somoachir, never remembered her name. He called her Girl when he needed something, and when he didn't, she was invisible. There was no explicit cruelty, there were no shouts or slaps. There was something worse. Constant indifference, the kind of contempt that leaves no mark on the body but digs inside until only shell remains. She didn't complain. She never complained. She swallowed every sideways glance, every veiled joke about her plain appearance, every comment from the neighbor who said, loud enough for her to hear, that a poor girl without beauty or education has no future at all. And the worst part was that, on certain days, Clara almost believed it. Almost. Because there was a part of her, hidden deep down, that resisted. A part that, at night, when everyone was asleep, sat on the back doorstep and looked at the stars with a silent hunger. It wasn't a hunger for food, it was a hunger to exist for someone. To be seen, to be called by name with affection, to be chosen. It was on a Thursday that everything changed, not with a thunderclap or a dramatic revelation. It changed the way real things change, slowly, almost unintentionally, almost without permission. Sauvaldir arrived home with a smile Clara had never seen before. It was the smile of someone who had solved a troublesome problem. He sat down in the kitchen chair, lit a cigarette, and told Donna Fatima, without looking at Clara, that he had found a solution. Renato, from the farm on the other side of the river, is looking for a woman to help with the house and his daughter. I offered Clara. Donna Fatima swallowed hard. She looked at her daughter. She looked away. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her, but her feet didn't move. She stood there motionless, dishcloth in hand, feeling her throat tighten and her eyes burn, but without shedding a tear. She had learned over the years that crying in front of them was giving them ammunition. Renato was known in the village as the quiet man of the farm, a widower for 2 years, father of a 5-year-old girl named Beatrice. He lived on a simple property, almost hidden among mango and jackfruit trees, on the other side of the river that cut Saint-Thomé in half. People said he was strange, that he didn't talk to anyone, that he lived in isolation. The women at the market said he was ugly, that he was too poor, that nobody deserved that life. And it was precisely into this life that Clara was pushed, like someone throwing a piece that doesn't fit anywhere. She arrived at the farm on a Saturday morning, with a cloth bag and a knot in her stomach. The dirt yard was clean, there were chickens pecking around, a skinny puppy lying under a tree, and sitting on the porch step, a girl with curly hair and enormous eyes who looked at Clara as if assessing a mystery. Beatrice said nothing. She just looked. And in that look, Clara felt something she didn't expect, recognition. As if the girl also knew what it was like to be abandoned. Renato appeared from the side of the house with a bucket of water. He was tall, thin, with hands roughened by work he'd done before he knew what work was. He looked at Clara with a brief, almost shy nod. He didn't smile. He didn't say welcome. He only said, "Your room is the one at the back. It has clean sheets." And he turned his back, not out of rudeness, because he didn't know what else to say. Clara recognized that silence. It was the same silence she carried inside. The first few days were strange. Clara cooked, washed, and tidied the house, while Renato hardly spoke. They ate in silence. Beatrice sat between them like a silent bridge between two worlds that didn't yet know each other. Clara missed something she never had, a real family. And at the same time, she was afraid of becoming attached to that house that wasn't hers, to that child who wasn't her daughter, to that man who hadn't chosen her out of love. But the days went by, and gestures began to speak louder than the words that were lacking. Clara was the first to understand. She noticed that Renato would have the coffee ready before she woke up. She noticed that he fixed her bedroom window without her asking, because it creaked in the wind at night. She noticed that every time she went to town, she would come back with a packet of biscuits that he never ate, but which he left on the table as if making a silent offering. And above all, she noticed the way he looked at Beatrice, with a devotion so complete, so raw, so vulnerable that it hurt to see. It was the gaze of a man who had lost almost everything, except the capacity to love. One night, Beatrice had a fever. Clara heard the soft crying coming from the girl's room and got up before the thought could form. She found Renato sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand on his daughter's forehead, his eyes red. Not from sleepiness, from fear. Clara wet a cloth, sat on the other side, and stayed there, silently caring for her. She didn't ask if she could. She didn't ask permission. She just stayed. And when the fever subsided, around 4 a.m, Renato looked at her for the first time for real. Not as one looks at a maid or a stranger. He looked as one finally sees someone who had been there all along. "Thank you," he said. And that word carried more weight than 1,000 sentences. Because it came from a deep place, from a man who didn't know how to ask for help, who had carried alone the burden of raising a daughter, of bearing a wife, of living without anyone asking if he was okay. From that night on, something changed between them. Not in an obvious way. There was no declaration or stolen kiss. There was something rarer: trust. Renato began to talk more. He told her about his wife, who died from a poorly treated infection because the nearest hospital was 3 hours away, and he didn't have the money for the trip. He told her about the nights Beatrice cried calling for her mother, and he didn't know what to say. He told her about the shame of being seen as incapable, as a failure, as a man who couldn't even properly support a family. And Clara listened. She listened with her whole body. Because she knew exactly what it was like to carry shame that didn't belong to her. And then Clara also spoke. She spoke about her stepfather who never wanted her, about her mother who chose silence, about the years of being treated as a burden, as a mistake, as something that should have been different. She spoke about the hunger to be seen that had haunted her since she was a girl. And when she finished speaking, Renato remained silent for a time that seemed far too long. Then he said, in a low, firm voice, "I see you, Clara." 3 words. 3 words that shattered years of invisibility. Clara cried that night, not from sadness. She cried because something inside her opened, like a door that had been locked for so long she'd forgotten it existed. She cried because someone had finally looked at her and seen not a maid, nor a solution, nor a convenience. Someone had seen her. Beatrice was the first to call Clara a mom. It wasn't asked. It wasn't rehearsed. It was on a Sunday morning while Clara was braiding her hair on the balcony. "Mom, pull slower," the girl said, distracted, and then widened her eyes as if realizing she had let go of something too big. Clara stopped. She felt her hands tremble. She looked at Beatrice and smiled with tears in her eyes. "Okay, my love," she replied. And in that instant, they both knew that something had been sealed, something that no paper or ceremony could formalize better than that word spoken unintentionally. Renato listened from inside the house. He rested his forehead against the door frame and closed his eyes. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Weeks turned into months, and the house, which had been too quiet, began to fill with laughter. Beatrice ran around the yard with the skinny puppy, who was now less skinny. Clara planted a herb garden beside the kitchen. Renato repaired the fence, painted the porch, and on a hot December afternoon brought a rocking chair from the city and placed it beside the door. "For you to rest in the late afternoon," he said, without looking her in the eye. Clara sat in the chair that same night and watched the sky darken, feeling for the first time in her life that there was a place in the world that was hers. But peace, like everything that is true, needed to be tested. Donna Fatima appeared at the farm on a weekday, unannounced. She came accompanied by her stepfather and a proposal that made Clara's stomach churn. So Valdir had discovered that a farmer from the neighboring region, a wealthy and elderly man, was interested in Clara. He offered money. He offered comfort. He offered everything that, in the stepfather's eyes, was the only thing that mattered. "It will be good for everyone," Valdir said, crossing his arms with that calculated smile. "Renato isn't even your real husband. You're here doing charity." Clara felt her blood boil. She looked at her mother, who again looked away. She looked at Valdir, who chewed on a toothpick with the confidence of someone who always decided other people's lives. And then he looked back at the balcony where Beatrice was peeking through the crack in the door, her eyes wide. "I'm not going," Clara said. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She said it in the firmest voice she had ever used in her life. "I'm not going because this is my home. That's my daughter. And that man sees me. And that's worth more than anything you could offer." The silence that followed was absolute. Valdir opened his mouth, but something in Clara's gaze made him recoil. Donna Fatima looked at her daughter as if she were seeing her for the first time, and perhaps she was, seeing the woman who had been born from that invisible girl. They left without saying anything more, and Clara remained there, standing in the yard, her heart racing and her hands trembling, but standing as never before. Renato appeared behind her. He had heard everything from inside the house. He didn't say anything immediately. He just stood beside her, like a tree that doesn't need to explain itself to provide shade. After a long silence, he extended his hand. Clara looked at that rough hand, full of calluses, of work, of history, and she took it. She took it with everything she had. That night, sitting on the porch while Beatrice slept in Clara's lap, Renato said something she would remember forever. I don't have money. I don't have a big name. I don't have anything the world thinks matters. But I can promise you one thing. As long as I breathe, you will never be invisible again. Clara rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. The villagers began to notice the change, not in a grand way. In small ways, like everything that is real, they noticed that Clara walked differently, no longer hunched over, no longer with her eyes on the ground. They noticed that Beatrice arrived at school with her hair braided and a wide smile. They noticed that Renato, the quiet man from the farm, now waved to the neighbors and occasionally appeared at the market with his family. Family. That word which before seemed unattainable for the three of them, now fit them like tailor-made clothes. What the village didn't know, what no one knew except Clara, was that Renato carried a secret, not a dark secret, a secret of hidden greatness. Renato was the son of a man who, before dying, had left a vast property registered in his son's name. Lands stretching for hectares beyond the river, covered in forest and potential that Renato never wanted to explore for fear of attracting the kind of people who only approach when there's something to gain. He had chosen to live with little because little was enough for him, because the little was honest, because in the little he knew exactly who was by his side out of truth and who was there out of self-interest. Clara discovered it by chance months later when she found the documents in a drawer while organizing her office. She stood there staring at the papers, her heart in suspense. Not because of their value, because of what they meant. Renato was, in the eyes of the world, the richest man in the region, and he had chosen to live as the simplest man. He had chosen to be judged, underestimated, despised. He had chosen all of that to protect the only thing that mattered to him, the truth of the relationships around him. She put the papers back in the drawer. She said nothing. She didn't need to, because she hadn't stayed for land or money. She had stayed because of a coffee left ready before dawn. Because of a window repaired without her asking. Because of 3 words spoken on a silent night. I see you. And that's what made Clara the richest woman who ever set foot in that village. Not the land, not the hectares, but the unwavering certainty that she was loved not for what they could take from her, but for who she was. On the last night of that season, the rain fell again on Saint-Domingue, but this time it was a different kind of rain. It didn't weigh us down. It washed away. It washed the earth, it washed the roof of the house, it washed away the past that no longer fit on the shoulders of any of the 3. Clara sat in the rocking chair with Beatrice asleep in her lap and Renato beside her, watching the rain fall. Neither of them spoke, not because they had nothing to say, but because some things only exist whole when they remain silent. Their love was like that, a love that didn't need grand declarations. It only needed presence, constancy, truth. And there, in that forgotten corner of the world where no one expected to find anything extraordinary, 3 people whom the world had discarded found the rarest thing that exists, each other. And that, in the end, was more than enough. It was everything.